It's funny how life can change in an instant. One day, you're living a perfectly normal life, and the next, you're thrust into a whirlwind of emotions and chaos. My name is Jake, and I'm here to share my story, a story that begins with a seemingly happy marriage and ends with betrayal and revenge. I married Lee 3 years ago. We met at a mutual friend's party, and honestly, it felt like a fairy tale. She was beautiful, smart, and had this infectious laugh that drew me in immediately. Our relationship blossomed quickly, and before I knew it, I was head over heels in love. We built a life together filled with shared dreams, Netflix marathons, and countless inside jokes. But lately, things had felt different. I started noticing little changes in Lee. She was more secretive with her phone, turning it face down whenever I entered the room. When I asked about her day, her responses were short, almost dismissive. I chalked it up to stress from work or maybe just a phase. Yet the more I tried to connect, the more I felt like I was hitting a wall. My gut was telling me something was off. One evening, I got home early from work, feeling excited to spend some quality time together. Lee had been unusually distant lately, and I hoped that a night in might help us reconnect. I walked in and found her in our living room, her cheeks flushed as she hurriedly closed her laptop. The way she jumped up startled me, like I had caught her doing something she shouldn't be doing. I shrugged it off, thinking perhaps I was imagining things. A week later, while I was cleaning up around the house, I noticed Lee's phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. Normally, I wouldn't snoop, but something compelled me to check. I picked it up and saw a message lighting up the screen from a number I didn't recognize. The message read, "Can't wait for our next video. You're amazing." My heart raced. Who was she texting? I quickly glanced through her notifications. There were more messages from the same number, most of which were flirty and intimate. My mind was racing, and my stomach dropped as realization hit me. Lee was cheating on me. She was seeing someone else. It turned out that the number belonged to a YouTuber named Tyler, someone Lee had become obsessed with over the past few months. I remembered those late-night sessions where she would watch his videos, laughing and commenting about how charming he was. I'd brushed it off, thinking it was just a guilty pleasure. But now, standing in our kitchen, it felt like a punch to the gut. My wife was betraying me with a man she idolized online. The next few days were a blur of emotions. I felt anger, betrayal, and a profound sadness that suffocated me. I couldn't look at Lee without feeling nauseous. Each glance reminded me that the woman I trusted had shattered everything we built. I needed answers, and I needed them now. The confrontation happened in our bedroom. I remember packing back and forth, my heart racing as she walked in. I turned to her and the words poured out, "I know about Tyler." Her face paled and time seemed to freeze. I stood there, waiting for her to respond, my heart pounding in my chest. She tried to deny it at first, claiming it was just a friendship, that she was just a fan. But her lies were transparent and I could see right through them. I pressed her harder, demanding the truth. The words spilled out. She admitted to meeting up with him, to spending time together that went beyond just friendship. And then she had the audacity to say, it didn't mean anything. In that moment, I felt my entire world crumble. I realized that the woman I loved was not the woman I thought she was. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but all I could do was stare at her, my heart breaking into a million pieces. I never expected to be in this position. I had always trusted Lee, and now that trust had been ripped to shreds. The emotional impact of her betrayal was like a storm raging inside me, anger, disbelief, and a deep, gnawing sadness. I felt lost, alone, and completely blindsided. As I sat there, trying to process the chaos in my mind, I knew I had to make a decision. What was I going to do next? The thought of separating felt unbearable, but I couldn't stay with someone who had betrayed me in such a fundamental way. This was the beginning of my journey through heartbreak, revenge, and ultimately learning what really mattered in life. How I would come out on the other side was yet to be determined. If you've ever found yourself in a similar situation, you know how quickly things can spiral. I was about to become a man with a plan for revenge that would shake both Lee and Tyler to their cores. But first, I needed to gather my thoughts and figure out my next steps. In the wake of Lee's confession, I felt like I was walking through a fog. My mind raced with a whirlwind of emotions, and the reality of her betrayal pressed down on me like a heavy weight. I spent the next few days in a haze, going through the motions of life while my heart felt shattered. I wasn't just angry, I was devastated. The woman I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone who had deceived me so completely. I barely slept, and when I did, my dreams were haunted by images of Lee with Tyler, laughing, sharing intimate moments, and betraying the vows we had taken. I couldn't shake off the thought that she had given someone else the kind of passion I had thought was ours alone. As I sat in our living room, staring blankly at the wall, I began to think about my next steps. Clearly, I couldn't just let this slide. The more I thought about Lee's betrayal, the more my anger festered, morphing into a desire for revenge. I envisioned Tyler, this YouTuber with a smug grin, who had stolen my wife right out from under my nose. He had a following, a public persona, and I realized I could leverage that. I needed to make sure both of them faced the consequences of their actions. I started researching Tyler, not just as a jealous husband, but as someone determined to take back control. I discovered that he had built his brand on charisma and charm, presenting himself as a relatable guy who loved interacting with his fans. I found out which companies sponsored his videos, which brands he promoted, and how he marketed himself online. It felt oddly satisfying to piece together his public persona, like putting together a puzzle that would eventually reveal a much darker picture. Then, I stumbled upon a forum where fans discussed their experiences with Tyler. It was a breeding ground for gossip, and I realized I could use this to my advantage. I crafted a careful message detailing my story, ensuring it was compelling and emotional without being overly bitter. I wanted to share how Lee had betrayed me and how Tyler had played a part in it. Before I hit send, I took a moment to breathe. I could already feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins. This wasn't just about getting back at Lee. It was about ensuring that Tyler faced the repercussions of his actions. I sent the message and then watched as the responses came flooding in. People were shocked, and many expressed their outrage at both Lee and Tyler. It was exhilarating. I had never felt such a rush, like I had finally taken the reins of my life back after feeling so helpless. I spent the next few days curating evidence, screenshots of Lee's messages, social media posts, and even videos of Tyler where he claimed to be a man of integrity. I was meticulous, and my heart raced as I prepared to reach out to his sponsors. Each email to his sponsors was crafted carefully. I made sure to highlight the kind of man Tyler truly was, providing them with irrefutable evidence of Lee's infidelity and how he had played a role in destroying my marriage. I included links to discussions from the forum, where people expressed their concerns about his behavior and emphasized the damage that could come to their brand if they continued to associate with him. As I pressed send on those emails, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. I knew this was going to hurt both Lee and Tyler, and it didn't matter to me. They had hurt me, and I wanted them to feel the weight of their actions, to understand the consequences of their choices. In those days, I was consumed by this plan. I found myself checking my email obsessively, waiting for responses. I anticipated the fallout of my actions, and the thought filled me with a sense of power. This was no longer just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity and showing Lee that I wouldn't just roll over and accept her betrayal. But as the emails started to roll in, I began to notice a shift. Some sponsors responded with empathy, saying they would look into it. But others were dismissive, claiming they had no responsibility for Tyler's personal life. Frustration began to creep in. While I had hoped for a wave of outrage against him, it seemed not everyone was taking me seriously. One evening, as I sat alone in our dimly lit living room, I felt a pang of doubt. Was I doing the right thing? In seeking revenge, was I losing a part of myself? It was a question that nagged at me. I had loved Lee, and while I was furious, I also had to reckon with the fact that she had been more than just a wife. She had been my partner, my confidant. The pain of losing that connection cut deeper than I had anticipated. Yet, the desire for revenge was intoxicating. I couldn't let go of the thought of Tyler smugly laughing at my pain while basking in Lee's attention. I needed to follow through. The plan was set, and I was determined to see it through to the end. The thrill of making Lee and Tyler face the consequences was overwhelmingly powerful, and I was ready for whatever fallout would come next. The stage was set for the execution of my revenge plan, and I was bracing myself for the storm that was about to unfold. My heart raced with anticipation. What would happen next? Would Lee realize the gravity of her choices? Would Tyler's carefully crafted image come crashing down? Only time would tell, but I was prepared to watch it all unravel before my eyes. As days turned into weeks, I found myself deep in my revenge scheme, pouring every ounce of energy into dismantling the lives of Lee and Tyler. The initial rush of sending emails to his sponsors had turned into a fixation. I was consumed by the idea of exposing the truth, even as I wrestled with the emotional fallout of my own heartbreak. Every time I scrolled through social media, I kept an eye on Tyler's posts. He was still posting videos, flaunting his lifestyle and engaging with fans. It made my blood boil. I couldn't help but imagine Lee watching him, laughing at his jokes, the way she once laughed at mine. I felt the anger boiling inside me, fueling my determination to destroy his facade. Then came the breakthrough. One evening, I received a response from one of Tyler's sponsors, a clothing brand that marketed itself as a company for young, trendy influencers. They expressed concern over the allegations I had presented and were conducting an internal review. It was a small victory, but it ignited a fire inside me. If one sponsor was wavering, what would happen when others caught wind of the situation? I began to reach out to more sponsors, crafting new narratives that highlighted Tyler's lack of integrity. I pointed out that associating with a man who had participated in a cheating scandal could damage their brand image. I was relentless, and with every email sent, I felt more empowered. At the same time, I was also aware that I was walking a fine line between revenge and obsession. I couldn't let Lee know what I was planning. I had to keep my cool around her, even as my internal world was in chaos. I forced myself to engage with her, to ask about her day, to feign normalcy. It felt like I was playing a game of chess, moving my pieces carefully, while she remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. One night, Lee came home particularly giddy. She had just been to one of Tyler's meet-and-greet events, a fact she couldn't hide. She launched into a story about how friendly he had been and how much fun everyone had. As she spoke, I felt a hollow pit forming in my stomach. The thought of her wrapped in his arms, laughing and sharing intimate moments while I was left in the dark was unbearable. "Did you get a chance to talk to him?" I asked casually, trying to mask my anger. "Just for a moment. He's so down to earth. I can't believe I was actually in the same room as him," she gushed. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to remain calm. "That's cool," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. But inside, I felt a storm brewing. If she was this infatuated with him, how could I possibly compete with that? But I had a plan, a way to expose both her and Tyler in a way that would leave an indelible mark. I knew I had to turn up the heat. A few days later, I gathered all the evidence I had collected against Tyler and Lee, organizing it meticulously. I had screenshots of their conversations, the messages I had intercepted, and even some insider stories from the forum that corroborated my claims. It was time to escalate my plan. I decided it was crucial to take the public stance. This was no longer just a personal vendetta, it was about holding them accountable. The next step was to create a detailed post online, sharing my story for the world to see. I began drafting it late one night, pouring my heart into the words. I knew that if it went viral, it could damage Tyler's reputation significantly, perhaps even causing sponsors to pull out altogether. In my post, I laid out everything: how Lee had betrayed me, how Tyler had used his platform to seduce someone else's wife, and how their actions had shattered what was once a happy marriage. I included the evidence, supporting my claims with screenshots and messages that showed the intimate nature of their relationship. As I hit publish, I felt a mix of anxiety and exhilaration. What would happen next? Would Lee see it? Would Tyler's fans rally behind him, or would they turn against him? I knew I had crossed a line into a new territory, and there was no going back. The post took off faster than I had anticipated. Comments flooded in, and before I knew it, people were sharing it across various forums and social media platforms. Some empathized with my situation, others were outraged at the betrayal. Tyler's fans, however, were quick to defend him, dismissing my story as a jealous husband's rant. But it didn't matter. The seed of doubt had been planted, and I was determined to watch it grow. A few days later, I saw the first tangible consequence of my actions. Tyler's channel released a statement addressing the allegations, claiming they were unfounded and that he had no knowledge of Lee being married. It was a calculated move on his part, but I could see the cracks beginning to show. His followers started questioning his integrity, and I reveled in that. But with every victory, I felt the emotional toll weighing heavier on my heart. I was still living with Lee, still facing her every day, pretending that everything was okay while I was orchestrating a personal war. I had become the antagonist in what was supposed to be my story, and it left me feeling hollow. As I lay in bed each night, I couldn't help but think about what I had lost. The love I once felt for Lee was overshadowed by a growing resentment. Would I really be able to walk away from this? Or was I too far gone, lost in a cycle of revenge that was consuming me? The lines between right and wrong began to blur, and I started to question whether this was the resolution I truly wanted. But one thing was certain: I was committed to seeing this through. Lee and Tyler had made their choices, and now it was my turn to make mine. I was in too deep to pull back, and as the storm continued to brew, I braced myself for what was to come next. As my plan unfolded, I found myself at a crossroads, torn between the exhilarating thrill of revenge and the gnawing emptiness that accompanied it. I was under no illusion that my actions were purely righteous. I had become a man driven by anger and a desire for vindication. But as I sat in the fallout of my own choices, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing more than I was gaining. The online post had sparked a fire, and the responses kept rolling in. Some folks were outraged at Tyler, while others sided with him, claiming I was just a bitter husband trying to ruin a popular influencer. The mixed reactions only amplified my turmoil. I had set out to expose Lee and Tyler, but now I found myself wallowing in the emotional chaos that followed. Lee, oblivious to the storm brewing online, continued her routine as if everything were normal. It was maddening. I watched her laugh and talk about Tyler as if he were just a friend, and I felt sick to my stomach. I wanted to confront her, to tell her the truth about what I was doing, but part of me feared the fallout. What if she turned the tables on me and accused me of being vindictive? I was already deep into this mess, and pulling back felt impossible. Then came the day when everything changed. I was scrolling through the comments on my post when I noticed a familiar face pop up. A comment from a user named TylerFan123 caught my eye, and I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. It was Lee's username. My heart started racing as I realized she was reading my story. I couldn't contain my fury. I had been so careful to keep my true intentions hidden, but here she was, lurking in the shadows of my revenge. I felt a surge of adrenaline and anger like never before. I had to confront her. That evening, I waited until Lee got home from work. She walked in, her face lighting up as she greeted me, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I paced back and forth, struggling to find the right words. When I finally faced her, I could see the confusion on her face. "Did you read the post?" I demanded, my voice trembling with barely restrained rage. "Post? What post?" she asked, frowning. "About you and Tyler, the one I wrote. I know you've seen it," I pressed. "Your comments are all over it." Her expression shifted from confusion to defensive. "I have no idea what you're talking about," she snapped, but I could see the guilt creeping into her eyes. "You're just being paranoid." "Paranoid? You think I'm paranoid?" I shot back. "You've been cheating on me, Lee. You've been texting him, meeting up with him, and I have the proof." The room fell silent as the weight of my words hung in the air. Lee's defiance faltered, and for a moment I thought I saw fear in her eyes. "Jake, don't you dare try to explain yourself," I interrupted. "You've already broken my trust. What else do you want to say? That it didn't mean anything, that it was just fun?" "Jake, please, let's talk about this," she said, her voice shaky. "Talk about what?" I snapped. "How you threw away our marriage for someone who doesn't know you at all. You're just a fan to him, Lee. You're a joke." The fight in her seemed to fade and she slumped onto the couch, covering her face with her hands. "I messed up," she admitted, her voice muffled. "But I didn't think it would come to this. I thought I could handle it." "Handle what?" I demanded. "Hiding behind your phone and betraying me. You thought that was okay." "I didn't want to hurt you," she cried, her voice breaking. "I got caught up in it. Tyler made me feel special. It was just supposed to be fun." "Fun?" I echoed, my disbelief palpable. "You think cheating is fun? You think this is just a game?" "I thought I could stop at any time," she said, looking desperate. "I didn't want it to go this far." "Too late for that," I said coldly. "You've already crossed a line and now you're upset because your little secret is out in the open." She looked at me, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Jake, I really am. I don't know what happened. I just got lost." "Lost?" I scoffed. "You think I give a damn about how you got lost? You made your choice, Lee. You made your bed and now you have to lie in it." As she sobbed, part of me felt a pang of sympathy. I remembered the good moments, the laughter, and the love we once shared. But that part was drowned out by the anger and betrayal I felt. This was no longer just about my pain. It was about preserving my dignity and ensuring she faced the consequences of her actions. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice firm. "I can't pretend everything is okay. When it's not, I need space." "Jake, please," she pleaded, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. "No, you don't get to decide how this goes. I'm done. I'm done with your excuses and your lies." As I turned away from her, I felt a mix of relief and heartache. The confrontation had unveiled everything, and while it was painful, it felt necessary. The mask was off, and I could see Lee for who she truly was, a woman who had betrayed not just me but herself. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wrestling with my thoughts. I had confronted Lee, but the emotional impact of the confrontation still echoed in my mind. Did I truly want this? Was revenge worth the cost of my own peace of mind? But as dawn broke, I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and finding a way to move forward. I had to take the next steps, whatever they might be, and I was ready to face the consequences of my choices. It was time to embrace the aftermath of the storm I had unleashed. Moving forward, I planned to sever the ties I had with Lee, to find my way back to myself. I had to remind myself that I was more than just a victim of her betrayal. I was a man with a future ahead of me, and I was determined to take back control, no matter how difficult that path might be. The days that followed the confrontation with Lee were surreal. I had made my feelings clear, but the reality of living under the same roof with her was more complicated than I had anticipated. There was an awkward silence that enveloped our home, a thick tension that hung in the air. It felt as though both of us were tiptoeing around a minefield, each step carrying the risk of igniting another explosion of emotions. Lee tried to reach out, attempting to engage me in conversation, but I was resolute in my decision to create distance. I didn't want to hear her excuses or apologies. I didn't want to rehash the betrayal over and over. I needed space to clear my head and figure out what my next steps were going to be. I started spending more time at work, extending my hours and taking on extra projects. It was easier to focus on tasks than to face the reality of my crumbling marriage. My coworkers noticed the change in my demeanor. They could see the shadows under my eyes. They could sense the weight I carried. I became a master of disguise, able to put on a brave face and pretend that everything was fine while inside I was unraveling. One afternoon, as I was working on a project, I received an unexpected email. It was from one of Tyler's sponsors, the clothing brand that had initially seemed receptive to my concerns. They had decided to pull their sponsorship from his channel, citing unforeseen personal circumstances. My heart raced. This was real progress. I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. The wheels of my revenge were in motion, and I was starting to see the fruits of my labor, but the satisfaction was fleeting. I found myself questioning my motivations. Was I truly doing this for justice, or was I simply trying to numb the pain of my shattered heart? I needed to confront the uncomfortable truth. While I was busy plotting revenge, I was losing sight of myself in the process. That evening I returned home to find Lee waiting for me in the living room. She had tears in her eyes, and for a brief moment I felt a flicker of sympathy. "Jake, can we talk?" she asked, her voice trembling. I hesitated. I didn't want to open the floodgates again, but part of me felt compelled to hear her out. "Fine, talk." "I know I've messed up beyond words," she started, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't express how sorry I am for what I did. I never meant to hurt you." "Sorry doesn't change anything," I interrupted, my anger flaring again. "You've already made your choices, Lee. I can't trust you anymore. You've broken that bond." "I know," she replied, her voice breaking. "But I want to make things right. I want to fix this. I hate what I've done." "Fix this?" I scoffed. "How do you plan to do that? You've already crossed a line. You can't just erase what you did." "I know it's not easy," she said, desperation creeping into her voice. "But I'm willing to do anything to rebuild your trust. I'll go to therapy. I'll cut ties with Tyler, whatever it takes." The mention of Tyler sent a wave of anger through me. "You think that just saying you'll cut ties is enough? You need to understand the depth of what you've done. This isn't just some misunderstanding. You cheated on me, Lee. You shattered our life together." "I realize that now," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I was selfish and stupid. I got caught up in the fantasy of it all. I never thought it would come to this." I felt a pang of sorrow for what we once had, but the weight of her betrayal was still too heavy. "I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again," I confessed, my voice softer now. "You've changed everything." Lee took a step closer, her eyes pleading. "I love you, Jake. I made a huge mistake, but I want to work on us. I want to fight for our marriage." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment I felt the flicker of hope. But then the reality of our situation crashed down on me again. I knew that even if I wanted to, forgiveness would not come easily. Trust, once broken, is incredibly hard to rebuild. "Love isn't enough, Lee," I said, my voice steady. "You've made your bed and now you have to lie in it. I need time to think about everything. We can't just pretend like nothing happened." As I turned to leave the room, I felt the weight of her gaze on my back. It felt heavy, like chains binding me to a past I desperately wanted to escape. I closed the door behind me, needing to put distance between us again. That night I found myself unable to sleep, thoughts racing through my mind. Should I consider her plea? Should I try to salvage our marriage? The question loomed over me, heavy and relentless. I had been so focused on revenge that I hadn't taken the time to truly reflect on what I wanted. I decided to reach out to a close friend, someone who had been a pillar of support. We met at a local bar, and as we sat down with drinks in hand, I unloaded my thoughts and feelings. I told him everything about Lee's betrayal, my revenge plan, and the emotional turmoil that ensued. "Jake, revenge might feel good for a moment, but it won't heal your wounds," my friend advised, his expression serious. "You need to focus on what you truly want. Is it really about hurting them, or is it about reclaiming your happiness?" His words hit home. I had been so consumed by anger that I had forgotten about my own healing. "I don't know what I want," I admitted, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. "I feel lost." "Maybe it's time to step back from everything," he suggested. "Take a break from Lee and focus on yourself. Figure out what you truly want moving forward." As the night wore on, I began to realize that he was right. I needed to prioritize my own well-being and find clarity amid the chaos. Revenge might provide a temporary satisfaction, but it wouldn't fill the void Lee's betrayal had created. When I returned home, I felt a sense of resolution. I would tell Lee that I needed space, not just from her but from everything. I needed time to breathe, to reflect, and to decide if I could ever forgive her. The next morning I sat Lee down. She looked anxious, and I could see the fear in her eyes. "I've thought about what you said," I began, "and I need to be honest with you. I need some time away from this from us." "Time?" she asked, her voice breaking. "But I want to fix this, Jake. I want to fight for us." "I know," I replied gently. "But right now I can't. I need to figure things out on my own. I can't be in this limbo anymore. I need clarity." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I held firm. "This isn't easy for me either, Lee, but I need to do what's best for me, even if it hurts." As I turned to leave, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. I had made my choice. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was a step toward finding my own peace. I didn't know what the future held, but I was determined to take control of my life again, regardless of the consequences. In that moment, I recognized that healing was going to take time, and perhaps, just maybe, I could emerge from this experience stronger and wiser. It was time to rebuild, not just my life, but myself. The days stretched into weeks as I took the necessary steps to rediscover myself. Moving forward without Lee felt surreal. The house was filled with echoes of our past, and at times it felt haunting. I'd often find myself staring at the walls, memories flooding back, both good and bad, but I knew I had to remain strong. I began to focus on routines that brought me comfort. I immersed myself in work, sought out hobbies I had neglected, and even started hitting the gym more consistently. It was a way to channel my anger and sadness into something productive. I read self-help books, seeking wisdom on healing and forgiveness, trying to make sense of the chaos my life had become. Each step felt like progress, no matter how small. During this time, Lee had retreated into her own world. I had cut off communication, and though it was tough, I thought it was the best way to gain clarity. I often wondered if she was truly reflecting on her choices or if she was simply waiting for me to return. The silence was deafening, but it allowed me to evaluate my feelings without her influence clouding my judgment. After several weeks, I decided to reach out to Lee. I wasn't sure what I wanted from the conversation, closure perhaps, or the possibility of moving forward together. I asked her to meet me at a local cafe, a neutral ground where we could talk without the weight of our shared home hanging over us. When I arrived, I spotted Lee sitting at a table, fidgeting nervously. The woman I once knew looked different. There was a vulnerability in her eyes that hadn't been there before. As I approached, I could see the tension in her posture, and I felt a mixture of apprehension and determination. "Hey," I said, offering a small smile as I sat down across from her. "Hey," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. There was a palpable awkwardness between us, an unspoken acknowledgement of the elephant in the room. "I've missed you," she admitted, her gaze dropping to the table. I nodded, feeling a pang of nostalgia. "I've missed you too, in a way, but it's been good for me to have this time apart." Lee looked up, her eyes searching mine. "I've had a lot of time to think about everything about us. I know I messed up, and I'm truly sorry for the pain I caused you. I never meant for it to go this far." I took a breath, letting her words sink in. "I know you're sorry, Lee, but it's hard to just forget everything that happened. You broke my trust, and rebuilding that isn't something that happens overnight." "I understand," she said, tears gathering in her eyes. "I don't expect you to forgive me right now. I just want you to know that I've been working on myself. I'm in therapy, trying to figure out why I made those choices. I want to be a better person no matter what happens between us." Her sincerity struck a chord within me. I could see the remorse in her eyes, and for the first time since the betrayal, I could sense a glimmer of hope. "That's a good start," I replied cautiously. "But I need to know that you're doing this for yourself, not just for me or to win me back." "I am," she said earnestly. "I want to be better for me, and if that means you and I can never be together again, then I'll accept that. But if there's any chance for us, I want to work for it." The weight of her words settled in the air between us. I felt the barriers I had built around my heart begin to crack. It wasn't easy to hear her profess her desire for change, but a part of me still held on to the love we once shared. "I need time, Lee. I'm still healing. It's going to take a long time for me to even consider what reconciliation might look like," I said gently. "But I don't want to close the door completely. Let's take it slow." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'll wait, no matter how long it takes. I just want a chance to prove to you that I can be better." As we left the cafe, an unexpected sense of relief washed over me. I had finally expressed my feelings and fears, and perhaps the path forward didn't have to be entirely bleak. While I was still navigating the aftermath of betrayal, the possibility of reconciling with Lee lingered in the air. In the weeks that followed, we communicated more, slowly rebuilding a friendship rooted in honesty. There were moments when I felt anger resurface, but I learned to process those feelings instead of letting them consume me. Lee showed genuine effort in her journey towards self-improvement, and as I witnessed her growth, I allowed myself to soften bit by bit. Meanwhile, I continued to focus on my own well-being. I sought out therapy as well, realizing the importance of understanding my own emotions and learning how to navigate relationships in the future. I discovered that healing is a journey, not a destination, and that it's okay to take small steps rather than rushing into decisions. Eventually, I reached a point where I could envision a future, one where Lee and I could potentially rebuild our lives together, but only if it was built on a foundation of trust and respect. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but the thought of navigating that journey together brought a sense of hope into my heart. Through this tumultuous experience, I learned profound lessons about love, trust, and the importance of self-discovery. I discovered that while betrayal can shatter you, it can also lead you to a deeper understanding of yourself. I learned that revenge, while sweet in theory, often leaves a bitter aftertaste and that true healing comes from within. As I reflected on my journey, I wanted to share a message with anyone who might find themselves in a similar situation. It's okay to feel hurt, angry, and lost. It's okay to take time for yourself. Just remember that healing is possible, and sometimes the hardest battles lead to the most fruitful outcomes. Forgiveness, whether for others or yourself, can be a powerful force in reclaiming your happiness. Life is a winding road filled with unexpected turns, and while I still didn't know where my path would lead, I felt ready to embrace whatever came next. After all, this was my story, and I was finally taking the reins.